Hello and welcome to The Middle for this very special episode of The Middle. We are so blessed to have an opportunity to talk with some individuals that I know will bless your life and have a unique perspective in how they see the world and how they see their faith and how they relate to others. And our first opportunity to have this conversation is with Daniel Stovall. And I have actually known Daniel and his family for all of Daniel's life, but Daniel probably doesn't remember me. Welcome, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Would you introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are, how old you are, and what you do with your time?
Um, I'm about 21 years old. I've been in Utah my entire life. I'm currently on a service mission, so yeah. Um, I was I'm currently serving at the Bishop Storehouse in Springville and as well as the church's motion picture studio. So
That's wonderful. You are considered on the spectrum, and the spectrum is a very wide spectrum. That's why it's called the spectrum.
yeah,
How do you explain to people how you see the world?
I I guess a big way to just a bit of a mental disconnect with people. I feel like I'm missing a bigger part of the conversation with a lot of people. I guess there's just some kind of disconnect or like obliviousness, I guess,
Okay.
to
Be-
people.
because you've been diagnosed as autistic, is that correct?
Yes.
And so if you were to describe to someone what it's like to be autistic, you're saying to me, what I hear you saying is that there's a little bit of a disconnect. Is that how you would describe it?
That's one way I'll describe it. Uh, Another way I would describe it is being entirely focused on one subject or aspect of life or the world. Um, so much so that it influences your life, is a good way to put it. And that kind of leads into that disconnect, that mental barrier with missing the conversation.
Would you tell our audience a little bit about you and where you live and what you do?
Hello. Well, my name is Alan Wheeler. I'm 35. I live in Sandy, Utah. Right now, I'm trying to start my own laser engraving business. So that's what I'm doing right now. That's pretty much me in a nutshell right now.
Okay. And one of the things we have in common, we have not ever, I don't think, had a conversation, but you knew my sister Meg. And for those that are an audience of The Middle, they know of Meg and her story because I talk about her story a lot. And you met each other while attending college. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We took a couple of humanities classes together, one of which was a world religions class.
How would you describe where you are on the spectrum? Because the spectrum is literally that. It's a spectrum, right?
So I am mild high functioning, or I have mild Asperger's, which is high functioning autism.
Okay.
Which means basically I'm intellectually, I can figure things out. You show me how to do something once, I can do it. But like social cues and emotions, they're a bit of a challenge.
Hi, Chantal.
Hi.
Thank you for making time to share a glimpse into your beautiful world and your experience. Would you introduce yourself and and share a little bit of your bio and your family.
Sure. My name is Chantel Gardner. My husband is Joel Gardner. We've been married 25 years. We have 6 children, and all of them are on the autism spectrum, as well as my husband and I. We were not aware of that. We were diagnosed in 2008 when we moved to Minnesota. But my children range in age from 7, and my oldest is 24. And we have a great family. We live here in Wisconsin and have a lot of fun, do a lot of things.
I feel like we've hit the jackpot when it comes to having a conversation about spectrum experience with you, because like you've just shared, you feel it personally, you parent from that perspective, and your children experience it and your spouse experiences it as well. And I just can't wait to see where the Lord takes this conversation, because I feel like you have so much to teach us and bless those that are going to watch this episode. So thank you for your willingness. How would you describe being on the spectrum for someone that does not have a personal connection with spectrum?
That is difficult because it's my normal. The things that in discussions with typicals, in the differences that I've noticed is that I think differently. I think in 3-dimensional images and in movies. I have a special interest and gifts I'm gifted in memory. But there are also struggles with language, being able to get across what I mean. Also having some speech impediments, language delays, things like that. All of my children have experienced those things. There's also a neurological component involved with like low muscle tone, muscle spasming, things like that are all involved with autism. But those are just some of the things we deal with, but there are so many wonderful things.
So would you say that is a blessing, that you're able to focus on one thing? Would you say that that's a good thing for you?
It's kind of a double-edged sword, I would say. Some ways it is a blessing because I'm able to focus on one particular thing and do it well. On the other hand, it makes it hard for me to connect with other people, and especially if it's like a subject matter that I dislike, it makes it harder to connect.
What are some of the things you feel like you're good at because you can really focus on them well?
One thing that I do really well, as what I've been told, is giving talks in church. Once I'm able to fully like articulate all my thoughts and like get them together and able to speak them in a cohesive way, I'm able to fully say my thoughts, and it's not like I'm reading off like a script. I'm actually fully giving my thoughts.
Did that help you when you were in school, or was it challenging?
In some ways, yeah, it was like giving presentations in school, like for like big group projects. I was fairly good at speaking to people and like when I have like a plan and like know what I need to say and how I should say it, that's what I that's one thing I do really well.
What parts of it are a blessing for you?
I view it as a blessing because one, I get this because I'm not inherent. I don't have the ability to read emotion inherently. I had to learn. I had to observe. I had to sit and watch, which meant I had to learn, and it gives me more of a willingness to learn and have the patience to do so. It wasn't easy because there were days like when I was a kid where I'd be at school and it felt like the kids hated me, but it wasn't that they hated me. It's that my perception was that way.
Yeah.
And I realized that basically being on the spectrum, I have the ability to see other perspectives than just my own because of that.
I love, Alan, that you said that because you didn't know how to do it inherently, you had to teach yourself how to read the emotional and social cues of others. And because of that, now you probably are more aware and more sensitive to other people because you had to learn that as a skill. It didn't just come with your
Yeah.
life experience.
No, and having learned it and having to put effort into it, I think in some ways is better than having it inherent because you do take it for granted.
How have you experienced spectrum as a blessing in your life for yourself and your children and your spouse?
I think being on the spectrum is remarkable. I didn't know that I was on the spectrum my entire life, until I was an adult. I was 2008. And I love the way my brain works. I love that I can retain information. I love that I can use my gifts to spread the gospel. I do my firesides about Emma Smith, and I'm able to retain that information very quickly. And I love that the Lord has taken this gift that I have and has allowed me to serve. And I love it. I mean, there are sensory issues, and I have food issues, and I have things like that. But so does everybody. I mean,
Right.
everybody has things like that. And so focusing on the gifts and focusing on how amazing it is. Like my son Sawyer is serving a service mission right now, and he is highly gifted in mathematics. That is wonderful. I mean, there are so many, the way that my children think and the way that my husband thinks and the way that I think, I love it. I love that we think of things in a different way, and I enjoy it. And there's a lot of misconceptions about being on the spectrum, that you don't have a sense of humor, that you don't understand idioms, or you don't understand metaphors, things like that. That is 100% not true.
Okay.
My children are hilarious. And it is, like I said, it is a spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to discover what is going to be next in their minds, what creative thing that they're going to come up with, or a different way that they're going to look at things.
I love
that.
I love that. How has being on the spectrum, being autistic, been a challenge or been hard?
One way is like that, the disconnect, as I have mentioned before, and another way is on the spot stuff, like when I have a plan, I'm able to fully and like can fully bring my thoughts together. Like I have no problem with it. When I don't, and like I'm being called on the spot with certain things like prayers, I tend to fall apart. It's not like I'm not willing to do like a prayer, like start a prayer for a meeting. It's just that I have a hard time like thinking of what should I say during this group prayer, like what truly matters and how should I bring that into a full like bring it together essentially.
That is really helpful because I think a lot of people that are not on the spectrum can relate to unexpected last minute changes that are hard and stressful. But what I hear you saying is it's even harder. You're willing to do those things, it's just harder for your brain to process the last minute details,
Yes.
and it creates anxiety for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. What have been some of the challenges with high functioning?
Honestly, the ability to connect emotionally is sometimes hard because there's a misconception with people on the spectrum that they don't have emotion. It's actually the opposite. The emotion is so intense, we don't know how to deal with it naturally. It comes with the whole social cues thing, because we have this ball of emotion and we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because I had parents that allowed me to fail. And they didn't just allow me to fail, they allowed me to fail, but they taught me what I did wrong, whether it was through whether they tried to do it through words or via actions. So
What a beautiful acknowledgement of your parents allowing you to fail. I think I have a almost 24-year-old son, and I have a daughter that's 17, almost 18, and it's hard as a parent to watch your kids struggle, but I love your awareness that because of that process you started to learn what worked and what didn't work each time you failed.
yeah, it took a while for that to click though.
What are some of the challenges from being on the spectrum and parenting those that are on the spectrum?
Well, this one question I was anxious about answering.
Okay.
Because it's not a popular answer.
Okay.
The hardest thing about being on the spectrum and having children on the spectrum are other people. And like, for example, getting services. And the reason that you want the diagnosis is so that you can receive the services. You have to have the diagnoses to be able to get the therapies that you need and things like that, which is the reason that we sought them. However, there are things like, I can give 2 examples of friendships, keeping friends. I don't keep friends very well because I'm a little odd in the way that I think, and I don't follow social expectations. And when those expectations aren't met, people get upset and they just stop being friends with me. And that's kind of a pattern. The exception to that has been Stephanie Sorensen.
Who connected us. So yeah, anyone that has watched Stephanie on Book of Mormon Central, I've guested on her show, and she's a dear friend. She's a Covenant author. We have the same publisher, and she is the bridge between Chantel and I. So I'm grateful.
Oh, she is amazing. She just accepted me for who I was and didn't take anything personally. And we've been friends for years. But the second thing is, my daughter is a student at BYU. And she, because of COVID, started going online and being online. And her grades went from like C's and D's to straight A's once that she started schooling from home in an environment where she felt safe. And she couldn't navigate traffic, driving, groceries, living on her own. All of that was so overwhelming. It was just too much. For her ASD, she doesn't have a lot of capacity for those life skills kind of things. So her grades just dropped. But when she moved and was at home in a place where she felt safe, didn't have to deal with all that, she ended up getting straight A's. But now BYU will not accommodate that and give her those accommodations. They don't think she needs that. And so she's looking at possibly having to drop out, which is devastating.
Yeah.
Devastating. And that is one of the most difficult things about having a disability, is that people who can give you accommodations don't understand the accommodations that you need. And because you present as high functioning and like, oh, you should be able to handle everything, they're really reluctant to support you in a way that you can be successful.
How do you feel about God? And also, how do you feel about the church, especially from the perspective of being autistic?
From my perspective, like with God, with Heavenly Father, I know that He loves me, and I believe He wants us to be just like Him, to eventually return to Him. It's just hard to know why He gives us like difficult trials and tribulations, and even these kinds of disabilities, I would say. Just, well, not really disabilities from my perspective. Like, being autistic wasn't really a challenge, but it feels like I don't know why He puts hard times on our path.
So
But
what I hear you saying is that it's a different way of seeing the world, and it's not always obvious why God would ask us to do some of those things that become challenging.
yeah.
How does your feelings about God, I love your testimony, Daniel, of God and how much He loves us and wants us to be happy. Do you feel differently? Does God feel different from the church? Do those feel like different things for you?
I feel like with God, that's the religious part about church. And with church, I feel like it's kind of two-pronged, like schools. Like, there's the educational learning part, and then there's the social aspect of church. And like, and I guess God kind of correlates to both things, because one of the commandments is to love God and to love your fellow man. So, like, with that, like, it kind of correlates to both the religious and social aspects. So now that I think about it, with church, like, it's the social aspects that I really like, even though I'm kind of introverted in a way. With church is like that social aspect, building a relationship with other people to really strengthen a relationship, to be there for others when they're in a hard time, and others be there for you when you're in a hard time.
Daniel, what I really like about that is there's a lot of people that may not see the world or experience the world the way you do, that they don't understand what you just explained so perfectly. They don't understand that there's God and then there's the church, and the church has different parts of it. And
Mhm.
so it becomes one big ball of stuff. And when one part of that gets a little off, it messes up all of it. And it feels like you have a really awesome way of seeing them kind of separate. And that, I think, is going to be a really great insight to share with our audience, because even those that are not on the spectrum, I think, could be blessed if they would start to see that the church has these different parts, and God is interwoven in all of it, but he's not all the things that happen at church on Sunday, right? Some
Yeah.
of that is just people and how they're different and how they're struggling and what questions they have and what they don't understand about the doctrine. So thank you for that wonderful answer. The other question I'd like to ask is how you feel about God and your faith specifically, and how it relates to how you see the world on the spectrum.
It's kind of instinctive. Like I I firmly believe in God, and I believe he cares about us. But like as far as like organizations go, I know they're made up of people, so they're flawed, which sometimes is really hard for my my autistic brain, because I'm like, it just seems so easy to just follow the rule or be obedient. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I understand things aren't black and white. I've in one of my photography classes, my teacher, they were teaching us that black and white photography is just gray. Everything is gray. It's just perceived black and white. And that's kind of my take on faith and religion, is that not everything's black and white. You need to be willing to see other people's perspectives and care about or consider their emotions and their beliefs to some degree.
What a beautiful answer, Alan. I think if all of us would have that Asperger's perspective on God and faith, we would do better. And so, what a beautiful way that you just taught me how you see the world and see God in it. And I love what you said earlier, that you feel emotion bigger. So I'm sensing that you also feel the spirit bigger, which can feel like maybe anxiety at times. Is that true?
Yep.
Okay.
Especially when you are getting intuition or personal revelation that whether you should do something or not do something, gets a little anxious, because I've learned that I always listen to that still small voice, because every time I haven't, bad things have happened.
Well, I'm with you on that, Alan. And I think you're right that it can be overwhelming, especially if you have some neurological differences, that you may hear God even more loudly than I do, and or those that are considered typical. And so what a great example of, like, just listen to the still small voice, right? Don't ignore it.
Yeah.
How does that affect how you feel about God, and maybe how you secondary feel about the church?
Honestly, and this is 100% how I have felt from the very beginning. I feel so grateful and so humbled that the Lord would trust me with this, and that he would trust me with these beautiful children, and that he gave me these gifts and gave me the stewardship over my kids, and being the mother of this family is just humbling. I've always been just blown away by it and thankful and feeling so unworthy and feeling that this is such a tremendous blessing and gift. And he picked me, and my kids picked me, and that it is the best blessing that I have ever received in my life. I have no doubt, and I've had experiences throughout raising my children, confirming to me that the Lord was absolutely involved with them, and that I felt like the experiences that I felt told me that I was a steward, but that they were his and he had them and it was going to be okay. And that I just needed to take care of their physical needs, take care of their spiritual needs, but that he had direct contact with them and that I could trust him and that it was all going to work out. And I just felt like I'll share this experience. There was one day I was changing a diaper on one of my babies, which is like the most, low thing you can be doing, to be like changing a dirty diaper. And I was stopped by the Spirit just telling me that this was the most sacred, important thing that I could be doing with my life. And that this is exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And that these things that I was doing of simply physically caring for my kids were sacred and important. And I just feel so overwhelmingly blessed and grateful. And I love the Lord. I love my Savior. I have no doubt of their involvement in my life and sending me with the struggles I have so that it could help me raise these beautiful children that are here for a reason. And in my opinion, are here to usher in the second coming. And that if the biggest struggle meaning, that I have is other people not recognizing that, and not that people need to recognize that, I don't mean that at all, but that getting the support and the accommodations so that they can have less anxiety and less of those things as they adjust to the world and adjust to the world around them, and getting that support, because they are incredible spirits, and I am humbled and blessed.
Is there something you could help us understand about how you feel about people and relationships and love? What would you say about that?
So from what I know, like, relationships and love are very similar, like in a way, like they're different in terms of context. Like love is a feeling and relationship is like a bond between people. Like both, I feel like, can be taken like way out of, like, in like very harshly different ways. Like with like love and relationships, like I feel like the natural thought is like an intimate relationship, when in actuality there's like a lot more. Like the Savior showed love and kindness to everyone. Doesn't necessarily mean he like had an intimate relationship with them, but he like showed like kindness to them. He wanted to have a essentially like a I feel like what I believe is he wanted to have a friendship with everyone. He wanted to have a relationship because you could love anyone and still be like you could love anyone and still be friends with them. I don't want to
You're doing great.
like I'm
I
taking it out of context. It's
you're
just
doing perfect. And I think if people realized how much Christ wants to have a relationship, like you're teaching me right now, a relationship, then they would not worry so much about the commandments and all the other things, and they would remember that we're doing those things to have a relationship with Christ. You did a beautiful job describing how intimate, not in the way that maybe the world thinks, but in the way that God wants. He wants to be close to us. How you feel about how being on the spectrum has impacted relationships for you?
I would say it's friendships. It's been great because I have friends that are like, I don't know or they say, I don't know very many people that were willing to keep coming back, even though, sometimes people have issues like they're dealing with depression or anger. And when you try calling them or talking with them, they don't want to talk. Well, the nice thing about Asperger's and autism is we don't have that that filter, so we continue to harass until they actually talk.
So you don't give up on people.
Nope. And but on the dating side, it's a little hard because with autism, we don't hide behind masks like a lot of normal society tries to do. What you get or what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So
those social cues of playing kind of like relationship games, you don't do that.
no. And it's because, well, first off, my brain doesn't get it, but second off, it just feels like a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, Alan. I kind of think we waste too much time playing those games. And so I'm grateful there are people like you on the planet to kind of cut through all of that and just say what you feel and not give up on each other.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you so much. Do you have anything else you want to share before we say goodbye? You get the last word.
For anybody who's struggling on the spectrum, it seems like it's hard, and it is, but it gets better. I'm not gonna lie and say it gets easy, but it gets better. Anything worth the struggle, you will grow.
Thank you. I am so grateful for the few minutes we've had together and for your willingness to give us a peek into the inside of your soul and your heart and the way you see the world. And I think it's a beautiful perspective, Alan. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You are the only one on our panel that is married. So I would love for your perspective on how you feel about love and relationships from a spectrum perspective.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. When I met my husband, I was actually engaged to another guy, but I met my husband and we ended up just being friends for about a year. And we just, anytime we were together, we ended up in a corner together laughing. And we kind of figured, okay, no, maybe there's something here. So after about a year, I had broken off my engagement and things like that. And I called Joel and I said, how about we get together? And he's like, oh, yes, yeah. And then he took over, and then, you know, the whole thing. Joel and I's, honestly, I felt just that being raised in the church obligation of girls get married, and that's what you do. You go to college to find a husband. And I felt that pressure. And that's why I got engaged so quickly and things like that. Now with Joel, it was different because we were friends. We weren't in that mode of, okay, that's just not going to be there. But on our first date, we received confirmation very, very quickly that likely we were going to end up married. And it wasn't about romantic love like that you see on TV or you see in the movies or you see, you know, Joel and I both are on the spectrum. We did not know that we were. So it was more like the Spirit gave us each individual experiences saying, this is the person that you are most likely to be successful with. And we both kind of went with that, and love kind of came later. And although we were really good friends, so I super liked him. I mean, we were best friends. We got along great. But there were, for example, things like Joel didn't realize that I was pretty until about a year after we were married. He looked at me and he said, "You're beautiful." And I'm like, "Thank you." And he's like, that didn't need to be a part of it, of the reason why we were together. And with autism and relationships and love, it's very logically based, but I don't know how to, okay, I don't want to sound, I don't know, I don't have the word for it, but there's like love, right? Like you see in the movies, and it's romantic and you kind of have it, and it's infatuation, and there's love. And then there's kind of a higher thing that is the Spirit, that is a spiritual experience that you have together that is more of a confirmation of this is right and this is good, and it makes you happy and it fulfills you. And that's kind of what happened.
Thank you for spending some time with us and helping us understand the beautiful way you see the world as an autistic young man. And thank you for teaching me and helping me feel the Spirit today. That's what all good missionaries do, and you did a great job of that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, friend. I'm honored to know you. I'm glad we're on the planet at the same time.